Welcome back to the MBC Sports Podcast. Andrew Sullivan, Connell Scruggs, JP Eisenhower, and Andrew Feeney as Marist prepares to take on Miller Grove this week for homecoming as Marist comes off an emotional big-time win over Stevenson Jaguars last week at home to clinch the Region 6 Quad A title as they won pretty easily, actually. It was a pretty big win, 23-0 over Stevenson. Connell, what did you see in that game?
I think that verified very much of the ability of the defense, I think, a lot. I think it showed the physicality that Marist has because Stevenson definitely, for sure, was the most physical team Marist has seen all year and probably will see for the rest of the regular season. Obviously, we have no clue what the playoff holds, but Stevenson, a very big team. On their offensive line was huge. I think the defensive line it matched up well against Stevenson's offensive line because of how fast they are. I think Stevenson just couldn't keep up with the speed on the edges. You saw guys in the backfield pretty much almost every single play for Stevenson. That's tough to do anything with as a running back. It's tough when you got guys in the backfield pretty much on every single play to make something happen. And I mean that front seven, I don't know what's going to stop them. I don't know what's going to stop that front seven for Marist.
Yeah, JP, what did you see last week?
I think the big thing was we came into that game knowing Stevenson wanted to run the ball, and they had 2 total rushing yards. I think that was really the huge thing for me, being able to stop Stevenson's ground game, and also the secondary holding them to 42 yards when they came out passing a lot more than we thought they would. And I think Marist defense just being able to completely contain Stevenson's offense, even though it was not an offense coming in that we thought was going to pose a huge threat to this Marist defense, being able to hold them under 50 yards for the entire game is a huge win for this Marist defense.
Yeah, I think the defense really proved its worth. Feeney, from the offensive perspective, Marist didn't look great, not very convincing over Arabia Mountain offensively. Did you think it improved last week?
What I really think improved last week was the quarterback play. Hayden Richardson, he made a lot better. Obviously, throwing the ball, it's still not there yet. It's a work in progress still. But running the ball on the triple options and the read options, he was doing a lot better. He's a lot more willing to give the ball off. You saw in the first couple of weeks of the season, he was very, very willing to pull it very fast. Like he didn't. And now that the season goes on, you see Lincoln Parker, Andrew Manley, they're starting to get more touches, and he's making excellent reads.
And I think also Marist had over 250 rushing yards that game, I think. And I think if you're Coach Chadwick and Coach Etheridge, you got to be happy with how your offense ran the ball. Stevenson's defense, they only gave up, I think, 1 touchdown throughout the entire year. And so to run for 250 yards on them, pretty much getting what you wanted on offense in the second half. First half, you kind of drove down the field a lot and then got stopped at around the 30-yard line. But really, just 250 yards rushing, that's pretty solid. Lincoln Parker had a good night. 2 large touchdowns for him. I think that's definitely promising.
Also, something that's not going to be a huge headline, but Dawson Jones making multiple field goals over 40 yards. That was a question mark coming into the season. Him being able to hit multiple over 40 is going to be big, especially heading into the playoffs.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned Lincoln Parker bursting out for 2 touchdowns from over 30 yards on the first play of multiple drives. 12 carries for 111 yards. Just a real big breakout game from him. And that just, I mean, you can attribute some of that success to the offensive line and their play. You got Ian Erickson over there just demolishing kids at right tackle. And all across, I mean, they've adjusted from what we've been able to see. I know they lost Davis McKenna, but switching Stephen Namias to left tackle and bringing in Ryan Phelan in at right guard, I mean, the team's adjusted. The front 5 has adjusted very well offensively, I think. You haven't seen too many hiccups. You saw 1 or 2 false starts, but I thought it was pretty sound performance, pretty convincing win over Stevenson. And we look at Miller Grove this week. Connell, what do you see out of them?
I think Miller Grove, it's a team that's pretty disciplined. They only have about 3 penalties per game for 20 yards. Pretty disciplined team. I think the most, that's the least in DeKalb County. And then as far as players-wise, I would look for Stephen Bacon. He's a guy that he's involved in both sides of the ball. On defense, he's 4th in DeKalb for total tackles per game, about 10.4. And then on the offensive side, He also gets involved in the rushing game. He averages 15.2 yards per carries, which I'm sure there's a bunch of long runs in there. He doesn't get the ball. He's not the feature back, to say. He's not the feature back. But the fact that he's involved on both sides, he's a good player. And then Philip Russell, the quarterback for Miller Grove, 56% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, and 366 yards. Yet to throw an interception, which is pretty solid for him throughout 5 games.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned Bacon, not the feature back. The feature back is Jarvis Stewart, the senior, and he's carried the ball 64 times for almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. He, on the other hand, is averaging just about 6 yards a carry. But out of your main back, 6 yards a carry, you will gladly take every day of the week, and he's averaging almost 80 yards per game. So a pretty well-rounded offense here. You just wonder what they'll be able to do against Marist, because Stevenson is a pretty similar team to Miller Grove in that they have a pretty good defense and a competitive offense, and Stevenson was unable to get anything done. So I think it might be a little more of the same this weekend, that Miller Grove is just going to struggle to perform offensively, and on the defensive side of the ball, all you can ask for is just to keep your team in the game.
Right, and Miller Grove has forced 15 turnovers so far throughout this season, which is great through 6 games, 15 turnovers. You got to be opportunistic, especially against a team like Marist, where you're going to get so few possessions on offense just because Marist holds the ball so long. You need as many turnovers as you can.
Certainly, as we take a look at your 4A rankings this week, Marist sitting atop the rankings once again. I think they've been there every week this year. They're 6-0, and Jefferson a close second. I mean, it's been 1-2 since week 2 after Bainbridge lost to Valdosta, I believe. So 6-0 and 7-0, and those teams have been locked at the top for a while now, and Benedictine up to 3 after they dropped 2 games earlier in the season. They're 6-2. Bainbridge number 4, 5-3. Flowery Branch up into a tie for 5th with Carver Columbus at 6-2, and Carver Columbus at 6-0, undefeated with a big game coming up this week. Cedartown 5-2 at number 7. Islands undefeated at 5-0. Stevenson down to 9 at 4-1, and then Baldwin 4-0 at number 10. Once again, you just got to look into that, and I only give 5 teams a chance here to win a state title, and that's Marist, Jefferson, Benedictine, Bainbridge, and Carver Columbus. You might say, why not Flowery Branch? But Flowery Branch lost 40-10 to Jefferson, so I think that tells you all you need to know, is that it's a pretty top-heavy classification here. It's not up in the air like you might see up in 7A, or, well, not really 7A, but 5A's got 10 teams that could win the state title. 4A, it's just a handful. As we go into our games of the week here, Connell, Valdosta and Lee County, it's number 1 and number 2 in 6A, and a massive matchup. Lee County enters at 7-1 and number 1 in 6A, and Valdosta 5-2 and number 2 in 6A.
Now, this is a region championship game. This is going to be the regular season finale for both teams. So the winner is going to be region champion, loser is going to be the runner-up. And what's interesting about this game is how both offenses are both dominant but do it in very different ways. Lee County is heavy running and Valdosta is heavy passing. They have Lee County has 2 of the leading rushers in Region 1 6A. They have Caleb McDowell, who's averaging 7.2 yards per carry, committed to South Carolina. And then you got Preston Simmons, also averaging 7.2 yards per carry, and he has 8 touchdowns. And then your quarterback, Chauncey Magwood, he's a Kentucky commit. He can pretty much do it all. He's got 214 yards rushing throughout the season, 340 passing, and 141 receiving. So he gets involved on pretty much every facet of the offense. And then you look at Valdosta, very different. Like to get it done through the air. Quarterback Amari Jones, region's 2nd leading passer. He's got over 1,100 yards this season and 12 touchdowns. And then you look at that receiving core. You got Taj Sanders, 4-star junior, Javante Sherman, East Carolina commit, and then Alla Brown, who's got 9 offers. Those guys are extremely dominant at the receiver position. Now, as far as the pick, the game is a 2-point spread. So pretty much it's a pick 'em here. I am going to go with the upset. Valdosta is not favored to win this game, but I'm going with Valdosta here.
Can't agree with you there, Connell. I'm going to have to go with Lee County in this one, even though I think it's going to be a close one, as it is expected to be in a number 1 versus number 2 matchup. Lee County just looks so convincing in their win over Warner Robins a few weeks ago, winning 27-7. Whereas Valdosta only beat Warner Robins in the opening week 28-25 in the game that was ultimately forfeited due to an ineligible player playing at quarterback for Valdosta. I just think Lee County has too many weapons here, and I think Lee County pulls it out, although I wouldn't be surprised to see these two teams back at it, competing for a state title against one another in 7 weeks' time. Feeney?
Yeah, I'm going to have to stick with you there, Sel, and go with Lee County. I've picked Valdosta 2 times this year, and both of those times they have lost. So I'm going to try and fix it this week and go with Lee County.
Yeah, I'm also going to take Lee County in this one.
Yeah, our second matchup is a massive matchup in 5A, as it's Cartersville and Calhoun, 2 teams in the top 6 in the rankings, in a region that features 3 of the top 6 teams in 5A. Cartersville undefeated in the region, and their one loss on the season is a 14-12 loss to Cherokee. They've got some of the best wide receivers you'll see in Sam Phillips and Devontae Ross. Sam Phillips, 38 catches, 420 yards. Devontae Ross, 23 for 530 yards in an explosive offense that has recently added quarterback Carlos Del Rio, the Florida commit, who has come off the bench in his 2 games, but I would expect to see a lot of playing time for him tonight, or rather on Friday night, and he's been 14 for 21 for 225 yards and 3 touchdowns. Calhoun, though, very balanced team. Their 2 losses come to Blessed Trinity and McCauley, and they've got one of the best throwing, running, and receiving trios you'll ever see. Jerian Hames, 1,000 yards rushing. Christian Lewis, 1,700 yards passing. And Cole Spear, over 900 yards receiving. So that's a very balanced offense. But I think Del Rio helps Cartersville pull this one out in the close one. And then it'll come down to point differential to see if Cartersville can pull out the region title over Blessed Trinity because their game got canceled.
Andrew, I think we're going to disagree again here. I'm going to go with Calhoun. Like you mentioned, there are 2 losses to McCallie. McCallie is an extremely talented team out of Tennessee, not even from Georgia. And then their loss to Blessed Trinity. They lost by 14, but they did have a lead in that game for a while, and I think they're able to compete. And a lot of the common opponents, like Cartersville, really hasn't played anyone. The one team they did play, Cherokee, they lost to, and pretty much every other team, both teams have played Calhoun and Cartersville, but I don't know. I just think Calhoun's got this one.
I'm going to have to agree with you there, Connell. I mean, I was really tempted to pick Cartersville, but I got to go with my gut, and my gut's telling me Calhoun, so I'm sticking with Calhoun.
You know, usually when we all pick against Andrew, it ends up bad, and I don't want to, but I am still going to pick Calhoun just because of how they played against BT. They were ahead for a lot of that game, and I really like their chances versus Cartersville.
Wow, bold move out of you 3. As we take a look at our big game in 4A this week, it's Hardaway at Carver Columbus, another game that might determine a region title game.
And I'm going to take Carver Columbus in this one. Carver has won 11 straight in this matchup. They're the number 1 team in 4A as far as points per game with 47.7 points per game. They've taken a huge step from last year to this year. And you talked about this 4A being a very top-heavy region and division. And I think that Carver Columbus is one of those top teams, and I don't see Hardaway as one of those top teams. So I think Carver Columbus is going to come away with a win in this one.
Yeah, this is a tough pick here because Carver Columbus has such an explosive offense, but it's nothing Hardaway can't compete with because Hardaway has so many good rushers, and they can run the ball all day. They have Jordan Moultrie, who's rushed for 830 yards, Savion Fuller for 480, and Kentavious Day for 590. And the last 2 there have each had 3 100-yard rushing games apiece. So just 2 explosive offenses, but Hardaway has not beaten Carver Columbus in 11 straight games, and Carver won 34-14 in 2019. So I got to stick with Carver in just a shootout.
I agree with you there, Andrew. I think this is going to be, wow. I wonder what the over-under is on this game because I feel like
85.
there's got to be at least.
123 points.
I don't know, but I feel like not Cartersville, sorry, Carver Columbus will be able to outscore Hardaway. I don't know if they're going to be able to stop Hardaway's rush attack because of how much talent they have, but, I feel like they'd just be able to outscore him in a shootout.
Yeah, it's going to come down to whose defense plays better. I mean, there's no doubt each offense is explosive, so I'm going to go with Carver Columbus just because I think they have more talent on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, as we shift into our college football segment here, we remind you of our standings on our picks throughout the year. I am in the lead. Currently, it's a growing lead after last week, but Feeney's catching up. I have 48, Connell, you're at 40, and JP 38, and Feeney 37. A big week for you last week as we all went 0-3 in college, and you went 3-0 with some big upsets. And let's talk about those upsets before we pick our only college game this week. And that big one of BC Notre Dame over Clemson. Feeney, what did you see out of that one? And a game I'm sure you enjoyed.
Oh, enjoyed. I was stressed. It was probably. I know it's probably the best college football game I've ever watched. I mean, other than like the Oklahoma and Georgia game in the playoff, that was really good too. But I mean, that's everything you want in a college football game. There's ups and downs. Notre Dame schemed perfectly. I mean, they knew that Uiagalelei is a great quarterback, but they knew that if they could slow down the run game enough to the point where they made him throw the ball almost every down, which they did successfully, they were going to win the game. And at the end of the day, that's what they did. So, I mean, and Ian Book, probably the best game of his Notre Dame career, didn't take a sack. A lot of that had to do with the offensive line, but also a lot of that had to do with his shiftiness and his scrambling ability in the backfield. And he didn't make bad decisions, led them down the field to keep them alive, 91-yard drive, made some great reads. I mean, Notre Dame proved themselves last week.
Yeah, Book was showing some serious elusiveness and just some poise that you would expect out of the fifth-year senior and pocket presence that he has certainly picked up throughout his career. I mean, he just looked like a veteran back there. He might not have all the skills to be a big-time NFL quarterback, but he looked like a fifth-year senior back there. Connell, how big of an impact do you think not only the Trevor Lawrence missing had, but also the injuries to Clemson?
I think, and this is kind of odd, but I feel like the injuries had a bigger impact than Trevor Lawrence would have had on that game. Obviously, with Trevor Lawrence, you're losing the leadership that he's had, kind of his poise in big games. He's played in so many big games throughout his college career already that it almost seems like it would be like another game for him. But man, Uiagalelei, he played fantastic.
He threw the ball for 400 yards. I mean, what do you expect, Trevor
True
Lawrence
fresh.
to come in?
If you're college football, that's something I took away from this game. If you're college football, you got to be scared of this kid. Because, my God, in his second overall game in his career, he threw for over 450, kind of led the offense in a comeback in the second half, and performed well. I mean, he kind of left all the doubts, he left all the doubters behind. He played really well in that game.
Well, I also think that if Clemson can get their defense back to the level it was 2 years ago, I think they certainly have a chance this year to win a title, but in the next 2 years, I think it's almost guaranteed if they can get the defense back to a championship caliber level, because I simply don't think it was at a championship level caliber in that game.
And last thing I'll say on that game, I know Trevor Lawrence was out, and I know they had 3 players out on defense that would start. But at the end of the day, I mean, Uiagalelei played a great game. I don't think you can put it all on Trevor Lawrence.
100%.
And I think that has implications for the next game, the next matchup between those two, because Trevor Lawrence is obviously bar some kind of crazy injury, he's going to be playing in that game most likely. And so we look at the fact that in terms of numbers, Uiagalelei, he didn't really lack in terms of like Trevor Lawrence's numbers he would have produced. So Notre Dame has a very good possibility of winning a second game in this series. And, man, the implications that would have on the college football playoff would be huge.
You know, I hate to say it, but aren't we still waiting for Ian Book to have that game? That game where he just completely makes every mistake possible. Every single year, I feel like he has that game where he just can't hit anything, and he feels like everything he's doing seems wrong. He's turning the ball over. He's not getting he's not throwing to the right receiver. He's making the wrong reads, and everything he's doing feels wrong, and he just has that game where he makes every mistake possible.
I don't think you see that as much, JP, out of a fifth-year senior. And if you're gonna say he had a game like that, it would have been against Louisville when he struggled to get the offense going. I mean, they only scored 12 points.
That was a big win. I
Yeah.
mean, let's be honest.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
shouldn't have been that close because Georgia Tech beat Louisville by like 20.
yeah.
But I mean, that's one of those games like the Boston College game for Clemson. You escaped.
It's a win. It's a
you'll
win's a
you
win.
escaped and you'll move on.
I think with Notre Dame, their defense is definitely going to be the driving factor in the
Yeah.
postseason, though. And I think that's what it was for Clemson in the past few postseasons, too, though.
But let's not get to the postseason quite yet because let's not forget Notre Dame still
Carolina.
has
Yeah.
some challenges. They have Wake Forest and Boston College, but you saw what Boston College did to Clemson, and then they have North Carolina, who was a top 10 team to start the year. So certainly not in that ACC championship yet, and they got to keep performing at a championship level if they want to remain undefeated until that potential rematch with Clemson. As we take a look at our college game of the week, only one this week as it's a pretty weak slate of games, but our big one out of the Big Ten, number 23 Northwestern against Purdue. This one has some serious implications in the Big Ten West, given that it could determine the Big Ten West champion.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, and the Big Ten is just as up for grabs as, I mean, it's Ohio State. Yeah, they're the clear favorite right now, but Purdue, Northwestern, these teams, if they went out too, there's a great chance about that. And Purdue's offense is electric. Aiden O'Connell hitting 71% of his passes. He's got nearly 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. And he has one of the best weapons in college football in Rondale Moore. But that being said, but Northwestern's defense is very solid. And that's really the best way that you can really describe the Northwestern team. They're just solid. They're not average. They're not great. Just all around, they're a good, above-average team. Unfortunately, that's not always a good thing. They really lack the playmakers to take them to the second level. And Purdue does not lack playmakers. And I think that the difference in this game will not be Rondale Moore. It'll be the guy who was overshadowed by him but is still very, very good, David Bell. True freshman last year. When Rondale went down to last year to injury, Bell racked up 86 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns as a true freshman. The kid is legit. The kid is good. Purdue is going to win this football game. So
I agree with you there. I think Purdue's going to win, but you got to be careful in that Rondale Moore might not play. He hasn't played the first 2 games, and that's unspecified. I believe it's a hamstring injury. They haven't. It's been kind of under the radar. And then David Bell has been there to pick up the slack along with Milton Wright. Those two have been electric. But let's not get caught up on Rondale Moore because he's questionable, and a lot of people are starting to trend towards the fact that he won't be playing. So he might not be a difference maker like he usually is. So I think they're going to have to rely on their other skill players, but they certainly have some. I have Purdue in a close one, and if they could win this game, they have some easier games, and then they'll play Indiana in the last game of the season to win the Big Ten West. So just a crazy turn of events with that Wisconsin COVID protocol.
I'm going to agree there. I'm going to go with Purdue, but Northwestern is not to be taken lightly this year. I think in years past, just because of their name brand, they're not taken as like kind of a contender or a legit team, which they're not a contender, but they're a lot better than they have been in years past. So I think teams can overlook them, but I'm still going to go with Purdue here.
You know what? I'm going to go with Northwestern in this one. I feel like they've played really well through the first 3 weeks of the season. Obviously, they had the big 43-3 win over Taulia Tagovailoa in Maryland. That might be an outlier game. I don't think Taulia was quite ready in week 1, but they had the 21-20 win over Iowa, and they had the 21-13 win over Nebraska. In a close game, I always favor the defense, and this year, Northwestern definitely has defense, and I think that they could do enough on offense to pull this game out.
Let's talk upsets here for a quick second. I got Boston College over Notre Dame this week. I know Notre Dame had that big win. A lot of times you see teams coming off that big win, they struggle, and unfortunately for Notre Dame, it's not too easy of a task this week. They got Boston College, and you saw what Boston College did to Clemson. They probably should have won that game if we're being completely and totally honest. And it's Phil Jerkovich going against his former team. I think that's the big difference maker is which Phil Jerkovich do we see, the first half against Clemson or the second half against Clemson? Because he looked like a complete difference maker in the first half and then a non-factor in the second half. And if he plays like he did all game in that first half against Clemson, I think Boston College makes this very close ball game.
I have Arizona over USC. USC, wow, I did not like at all how they performed against that Arizona State team.
Oh, Feeney got robbed on his upset pick
Big
too.
time.
Yeah.
Big time.
For sure, and I'm gonna try to get it this time. This Arizona team will beat USC. I think this time their first week got canceled. They were supposed to play Utah. Game got canceled due to COVID-19. So this is gonna be the first time we see them this season. And I don't know. You never know what you're gonna get. We could see a good Arizona team or a team come out of here with some fire and beat USC.
Yeah, so I hate that pick that you have because it's against my Irish, but I think it's a great pick. Like the logic you have makes sense, and it's not gonna be an easy task for Notre Dame. But my pick, I got Arkansas over Florida. I mean, Florida has looked great, and just kind of like what you said about Notre Dame. Florida's coming off a big win, and they can't walk in and just expect to beat Arkansas.
It's eerily similar too in that we got two quarterbacks going against their former teams.
Yeah,
in
so
those two.
I think I really like Felipe Franks. I really think if he hadn't got injured, he would have been the starter at Florida for these next 2 years. So I think Felipe Franks has a pretty good shot at taking down his former team.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with Wake Forest over UNC. Wake Forest, I feel like, is a team that's flying under the radar. I did not expect this game to be a 12-point spread, and I think Wake Forest is a team that could definitely upset UNC. I don't think anyone at this table is very high on UNC and what they can do this year, especially the offense has been very inconsistent, and I think this is a game that UNC could drop.
Yeah, inconsistent would be the perfect word to describe it. As we talk for one last subject here, halfway through the season now in college football, let's talk Heisman favorites. Connell, who do you like to win the Heisman as of right now?
All right, I got my boy Mac the Joker Jones. I feel like
Big Mac.
Big Mac is, man, he's played fantastic. Way overachieved expectations coming into this year. Tua, obviously a generational quarterback, and losing him, I think a lot of people thought Alabama was going to have a huge drop off in quarterback play, but Mac has impressed. He's got 2,100 yards. And okay, what I want to do is I want to compare him to the other candidates. So I want to compare him to Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, who I think are the top two right now in terms of Heisman odds, other than like to combat Mac. He's got 300 more yards than Trevor Lawrence in the same amount of games. He has one less touchdown, and he's got a higher QBR, same amount of interceptions. So I think he's just literally outplaying Trevor Lawrence against better competition. I mean, they played Georgia. He threw for over 400 yards versus Georgia. And then you look at Trevor Lawrence, right? He hasn't really played anybody. He didn't play Notre Dame, so he didn't have that marquee game yet. I mean, he's going to see him probably in the ACC championship. You look at Justin Fields. I mean, man, he has been fantastic this season. But keep in mind, the teams he's played, they have a combined record of 1-7. So he's been doing he's putting up these kind of numbers against just bad teams. So I don't know really how good Justin Fields is.
Yeah, hard to gauge. I mean, the numbers have been good. They can speak for themselves, but we don't really know how good Big Ten is because all the normal teams are not looking great. It's teams like Indiana and Northwestern and Purdue and Maryland that have looked like contenders in the Big Ten this year. And I think Ohio State survived this week, given that they don't have to play Maryland. I think
Big
that could have
time.
been a scare for them.
It made their already weak schedule even weaker.
Correct.
And I think the fact that ESPN had Maryland at only a 2.5% chance to win that game, that was wrong.
Yeah, that was very wrong.
No, that probably would have been someone's upset pick in here. And
I think I would have taken that. Well, who wouldn't have taken that
Yeah.
one?
I'd take that.
I think I'm going to have to say who I think as of right now should win the Heisman is Devontae Smith. Number 6 wide receiver for Alabama has been absolutely electric. But as we all know, quarterbacks are the only ones that are eligible to win the Heisman. So I'm going to have to go with Trevor Lawrence because I think if he plays 3 years of college football and doesn't win a Heisman, that'd be a shame, and I think the committee knows that. I think there's going to be some bias in there, and I think he'll walk away with the hardware.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence would have been my pick if he had played the last 2 games well, but he hasn't even been able to play the last 2 games. So, and God, Mac Jones is the real deal, at least in college. I mean, I don't know how it'll translate to the NFL. Alabama has kind of a history with that. Like,
Not a good one.
Absolute studs in college and then just fall off completely in the NFL.
Whoa. All right, quarterbacks, I'll give you that.
Yeah, no, quarterbacks. That's
okay,
all I mean.
good,
That's all I
good.
mean. That's
good
all I mean.
clarification
no.
there.
Yeah, no, Jerry
Everything
Judy's
else.
tearing it up.
Everything
Derrick
else is fine.
Henry.
Yeah, we're not
Jerry
worried.
Judy's tearing it up.
But-
now.
Julio.
I mean,
Calvin Ridley.
when you look at Justin Fields' numbers so far, almost 1,000 yards passing, 11 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. The kid's legit, and I mean, he's everything supposedly 4.3 speed. I mean, he's everything that you would want in a college football quarterback. He has more touchdowns than incompletions.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's when I heard about that stat, I was
Yeah,
like, oh my god,
so-
that's crazy.
And yeah, his competition hasn't been great so far, but I mean, neither is Trevor Lawrence's. Mac Jones is making a very good case. But right now, if Justin Fields keeps this up, which I expect him to, I think that he will win. He will win this.
Yeah, and for me, I obviously think Mac Jones will win the Heisman. I'm completely on board with the Mac Jones hype train, but I want to talk about Zach Wilson, the BYU quarterback. He's played great through 8 games. He has 2,500 passing yards. He has 22 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, and he's taken BYU to the number 8 team in the country and a playoff contender. They're a team that we don't talk about at this time of the year. They're never in the conversation, and now we're talking about them as a potential playoff team. They're undefeated, and he's a top 5 quarterback heading into the 2021 draft. He's someone that we need to be talking about as a potential dark horse for the Heisman Trophy, and he's also a very mobile quarterback. He can do it on the ground as well. He's a quarterback who I think we definitely need to watch out for. He could be a potential top 3, final 3 contender for the Heisman.
Definitely plenty of good candidates, and we'll see how that plays out throughout the next couple of weeks in college football rather. But that'll pretty much wrap it up here for the MBC Sports Podcast. As always, make sure to tune in to the NFHS Network and MBC Sports for live coverage of Marist vs. Miller Grove and all homecoming festivities at halftime. On behalf of Connell Scruggs, JP Eisenhower, and Andrew Feeney, my name's Andrew Silver, signing off for the day. Go War Eagles.